Lucas, thanks for joining us today. How's things going?
Excellent, thank you. Always the hectic time of year coming into Christmas. A lot of deadlines, a lot of commitments in general. So, as a parent of two children, I'm sure those other parents can empathise.
It's busy, isn't it? It's so busy. It's amazing how we sort of race to the finish line. Time just doesn't seem to get any slower, or we seem to be doing more things with that. Now, just can you tell us about Worthy and how you got it started?
So, Worthy, the name Worthy comes from a base of all children are worthy of connection with Earth, but to feel worthy, we need to feel vulnerable. And that's a base of creativity. So we're focusing on creating environments where children can feel safe and secure to explore, experience, and have a childhood. It came about from me being an early childhood educator, developing the environment where I worked, and then gaining a lot of interest from other people in the sector about, oh, how did you go about this? And prior to that, I was involved with developing community gardens and teaching permaculture. So if you imagine permaculture mixed with the play brain as well, that colliding, and we had the worthy baby.
And
Um,
lots of fun.
yeah, absolutely. 10 years on, we've got amazingly talented team from our project management team to a really skilled, I think there's about 30 craftsmen in the construction field. So now we design, we build, and we educate all things play for the early childhood sector.
Wow, no, that sounds fantastic. So you were saying you came through the early learning sector as an educator.
Yes.
How did you all of a sudden decide to? I mean, you're saying about your permaculture and developing
Yeah.
community gardens. Do you have a background in horticulture or
In
gardening,
permaculture,
landscaping? Right.
and landscape. But I started a business where I wanted to teach family about how to grow their own food. And I actually just was blessed with seeing an ad come up about being a teacher and teaching children about the outdoors. So I was like, well, instead of me going out to all these families, if I want to have that impact, I can go to where the children are. And that's remained the values at the core of Worthy, involved in the early childhood sector, because it's where we can have the most impact on future generations. And it's those informative years where they're developing their identity and their values and their connection with environment, and hopefully identifying as environment as we want all children to do. And that's where we can have the biggest impact. So that's where we play.
And do you see from your time with children, do you see the impact of having those natural playgrounds and that permaculture on children who may not have been open to that view to start with, and that their views change?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the vision of the my employer at the time to have my role was in addition to the ratio, and it was outdoors the whole time. But then I got to see firsthand the types of activities that's like children were scared of getting dirty and getting wet, and I was like, what's this about? It was really shocking. I grew up one of six boys, so when it came
You were
to
permanently wet and dirty.
yeah, absolutely. And it was about that risk and showing that courage. So I was able to have a lot of freedom given to me, and I got to just do experiments and with the children and really dissect and look into the type of experience and the type of childhood so many children are having now. And the discovery it's such a huge contrast to previous generations. And I say it time and time again, the children of this generation are growing up in a time like no other in history.
Absolutely, and you can see that from the way we're doing our developments, the way we're promoting that, that multi-story lifestyle,
Absolutely.
and, and building playgrounds that aren't necessarily free, aren't free form like what you and I grew up with.
Yeah.
We just went down the back to the creek,
Yeah.
caught
Exactly.
tadpoles, and brought them home.
Yeah. Well, we feel as a advocate for children um, that we have a responsibility to create such a thriving environment within the early childhood centre that represents that diversity in experience that so many of us had. And I've heard a quote, I don't know who said it, but it was like, I conveniently grew up in the best time to be a kid. It was like that 80s around that freedom, It was quite a boom period. Parents were in their flow. We had like a kilometre of free play on average. Now it's line of sight. And it was just, it wasn't out of really well thought out intention. It was just the result of environment.
And people pushing forward into that next generation, isn't it, and making those changes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to, like you, the late 70s, early 80s, and the freedoms we had. I mean, for one, no mobile phone.
Yeah, absolutely. The screen
Yeah, you
impact
had,
on childhood is phenomenal right now. And that's even just reinforces the responsibility we have to make these environments thriving, because we have to offset um, a biased childhood experience in the form of screens.
yes, I agree. Now, what I'd like to find out more about is what a natural playground means to you, following on from our, 80s learning.
Yeah. Well, it's a tricky one, because a natural playground for me is just one that replicates, that has time, freedom, and possibilities. And that's what playing in nature is about. You've got time to be there. Nature provides the possibilities, and nature provides the freedom to make your imprint on a space. And the higher the imprint we can make on a space, the higher the value to the child. Now, um, the default that because I build a playground and a play structure like a fort out of wood, it's a natural playground. And I would challenge that perception till my last breath, that just because it's out of wood doesn't make it a natural playground. It needs to have diversity, it needs to stimulate the full range of sensory experience. It needs to be able to meet the child where they're at. I liken a natural playground to a pot,
Right.
and that you're going to plant a seed in. You don't
Yes.
plant a seed and then tell the seed how to grow. You create a thriving environment for that seed to grow as it's intended. And you can make those considerations on the community where you're building these playgrounds, the demographic, the specific challenges, the numbers, the maintenance, the values and pedagogical approach of the people we partner with. They're all considerations, but we proudly go, well, if we put the child at the center of this experience, what are those key indicators that they need? And then how are we being held accountable to them?
Yeah. And when you're talking about key indicators, what are some key indicators that you look for?
Like previously mentioned, children we know learn through their senses. So
Yeah.
to deprive them of a sensory experience is creating a lacking experience to develop an understanding of themselves and the world around them. And when we explore an experience, we begin to realize where our body ends and the world begins, and that it needs to be this synergistic relationship. I was fortunate enough to go to Finland and do a talk in Finland, with the support of Lucy Cook pushing me to do it. Um, yeah, I did a talk there, and it was on that you can't have environmental sustainability with an environmental practice. To which a lot of people fold their arms instantly and roll their eyes. But um, once I do unpack it, it needs to be a social one of exploration of and a social practice. So of exploration in environment, of accomplishment in environment, understanding of the environment. And when we are fulfilled in a space, the innate response is, hey, I'll care for the thing that cares for me. And as anyone that talks to me has heard me say time and time again, environment creates behaviour, and behaviour is language. So you can assess, what are the children telling you about the environment they're engaging with?
And almost, I suppose, innately they're showing you whether they care or not.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And for me to give abstract ideas to a 4, 3, 4, 5 year old around caring for environment, when we know they learn through this sensory experience, is kind of, it's very abstract. I'm saying, hey, let's go
Yeah,
care for the environment and let's go compost. Oh, where's the environment?
yeah,
It's
that's
everywhere.
it.
What's in it?
Yeah,
Everything. That's a big concept for a 4 year old.
it is, and they're just looking at themselves, their little world,
Yep.
and how does it impact me?
Yep.
Having three children at age is all about me,
Yeah.
um,
I
and
I move and the
in,
world moves for me. And the
Yes.
more experiences where children can move and the world doesn't necessarily move for them, the truer the reality of their experience in the world beyond childcare and into the future. I think one of the biggest disservices we can do to it for our children is to give them the impression that exploring the world is always easy and you can do everything all the time and there's not a repercussion for a bad decision.
Yes. Bit like what we grew up with, action consequence.
Yeah, and I'm not
That.
talking about injury. I'm talking
No,
about
no.
there's repercussions socially.
Yes.
And our default when we're talking about exploring experience and being challenged, our adult reflex is kind of let's default to talking about injury and avoidance of injury. But let's shine a torch on the risk of social injury, social rejection. And for many of our children, the the scars and imprint left from a negative social interaction could last far longer than a graze of a knee.
Yes. Yes. Because we all almost expect a child to fall over and hurt themselves, whereas we don't necessarily see the social injury
Yeah,
so quickly.
yeah. Well, the injury or the consequence.
The
Um,
consequence. Yeah.
yeah, and when we have a well-intended, diverse environment which the children can understand as they're exploring it, and there's a certain behavioral rules that are cast over these experiences, um, children can see, observe, absorb these experiences, and then match their behavior to suit.
So moving on, then this is we're just talking about some amazing things about the natural playground. What are some challenges you and like even services have
Yeah.
in creating a natural playground?
Um, Obviously, it does require maintenance, and when we're coming out of an era where there is rubber and astroturf and a ford and a sandpit, um, we know we want natural environments. It's a child has a right as a regulations to explore and experience a natural environment. What a great regulation! I say, like, let's go for it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a positive one.
as a positive one, absolutely. It doesn't say they need to do this specifically and that specifically. Explore and experience a natural environment. Fantastic. Um, but we need to consider that we create imprints as we move in nature. And that needs to be managed and considered from even focusing on the right garden edging to retain a certain mulch or a certain variety of plants that's going to be more hardy than not. So that's a consideration. Maintenance will go up, and if you expect to change your environment and not increase your maintenance or level of engagement, and let's call it a level of responsibility, um, you're going to be it's going to be hard for you. So that's a consideration. Obviously, with nature, it grows and deteriorates. It's that ecology of the environment. Um, what's some producers and some consumers within ecology.
Yeah,
So
and the
there's
weather is obviously
weather, weather,
part in it.
changing environments with weather from a supervision standpoint. When things get wet, as a rule, the higher the risk, the closer the supervision. So when it rains and that inclement weather, that's a consideration to have.
Yes,
Supervision changing over time as well. I think when you're planting trees and trees grow and shrubs change, we want to progress our supervision plans to suit. And the biggest thing, I think, consideration is how us as educators and caretakers of environment and children engage in the space. Um, a default we see is from a high impact space, if you will, where there's a lot of fast
yes,
moving play, is we tend to default to the generals of like, don't do that, be careful, you can't do that, be careful of this, don't run here, that's not to be used in that spot. So with a natural environment and encouraging better decision making, we need to kind of break that habit of being the generals and collaborate more with our children within giving them the information they need to make an informed decision.
yes.
So
That's
instead
a
of
challenge.
saying, yeah, and our reflex, because we love
Yeah,
children and we want them to experience, is to careful, stop. And obviously, if there's inherent danger, we say stop, freeze, whatever, we're going to jump
Yeah, yeah,
in.
yeah.
But for the
Yes.
sake of a child just solving a challenge they're dealing with, we can catch our reaction and focus on our responses.
And do you help the centres overcome that challenge about supervision and train staff?
100%. Yes.
Yeah,
So my thing from day dot is, if you are looking at doing a renovation, especially renovations, because there's a change in play culture when that happens. If you're looking at doing that and you don't change your habits to suit the change of environment, you might as well not do it. Like, because it's going to create a lot of hardship. And yes, change is messy in the beginning. It's challenging in the beginning, messy in the middle, and glorious at the end. But we have to get to glorious.
that's right. And
So when we do it, before we open a playground, we're going into train staff. We're getting children's feedback on the environment. So we're creating the environment to meet their needs first. So there's not that big mismatch. We're
yep.
talking about supervision plans. We're talking about language to use. We're talking about intention and pedagogical approach. So our values are aligning with the intention behind the design.
And can I ask you? You mentioned ask the children for feedback. How do you do that? Because I'm thinking natural playground. We're doing things for the children.
Yes.
Um, how do you gather that feedback from children who are 3, 4, 5?
Yeah. So you have to build a bit of rapport there. If I go in and ask any child, hey, what do you want in your playground? What are they going to say? Because
Sand,
yeah,
dirt.
well, I've just said playground, so that's defined as playground. What do we think about when we playground? We're thinking
Oh,
a swing,
swing.
a slide, a flying fox is classic, because what child doesn't want a flying fox? And yeah, oh, trampoline.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the default, because we've planted the vision, and then we're asking the question about the vision. Now, if I get to create a bit of a rapport and be a play partner with the children, um, and we start to reflect on what's our favorite things to do outside, what brings us joy, um, very Marie Kondo, isn't it? It's like, what brings you joy?
Marie Kondo. Yeah, yeah,
not,
yeah,
not,
yeah,
not so
yeah.
much, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but in that feeling of fulfillment or happiness
yeah,
or a good space
yep,
from from
yeah.
from your from from your feet, sort of thing, isn't it? It's that.
Absolutely. So when we work, I recently went into a college on the Gold Coast here, the teacher was having the dialogue first, so it was a default of the swings, the slides, the flying foxes. But as we broke it down into, like, what don't you have in your playground at the moment that you would like around experience? Yeah. So all of a sudden we're talking about, oh, I really like places to hide. Yeah. It's
I bet the
nondescript.
teachers went, "Oh no."
Well, supervision, yeah, but they're telling me they want places to hide where they can jump, where they can hang, where they can get dirty and wet. And a great way to change a bit of the lens children are looking at, I tend to ask children about what their good friend would enjoys most about outdoors. Um,
Oh,
so instead of asking Jack, what do you want outdoors? What do you want to play? Or what's the experiences you like? Just remove them from that reflection and ask, hey, Jack, what does Alex's favorite thing to do? What's his favorite thing to do outdoors? Because from a sensory absorption standpoint, he's always looking at his best friend. They're pushing, they're pulling. So from a sensory understanding, it could be easier, and you've got more data to reflect on if I'm asking Jack about Alex.
and then you ask Alex about Jack,
Yes, exactly.
right? So you get the answer you want, but from a perspective of their friend
Yes.
who is who is obviously doing it with them.
Yes, absolutely. So it's that's what co-design is about.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long does it take? What's your process? From
Um,
say I ring from a centre, say let's change
well,
this on
it all
natural
depends on the
playground.
needs of the centre, like, and the school. Like with some schools, working with the Australian Institute of Play, they will go in and they will do like weeks of workshops with parents, with children, and that's a service they offer. And I'm a part of the AIP as well, but it's a part of the service they offer to coach children, and they're doing supporting children to create junkyard playgrounds in their schools, and it's just wild and having amazing
Wow.
impact.
Where
Um,
is this Institute of Play? Is it
they're based
in
out of Logan,
right?
and
Okay,
it's all Logan based because it's Australian Institute of Play, but it's like let's get the proof of concept and evidence of impact and sustainability and handing those responsibilities over to community before we just start trying to throw those services everywhere and
right.
having great results. Great results.
Wow,
What
that's
was that? Yeah,
fantastic. What a,
here we go. Look,
that's
the that's the AIP. That's the annual report, and
oh,
a bit of highbrow data here. What was it? Um, so I'll show you a quick picture here,
that's all
actually.
right. No, go ahead. I was going to say at the end, when we share this with our audience, it'd be great to have a link to the Australian Institute of Play for further information
Absolutely.
after.
So this
After
was a specific program they did to develop Jumanji Land with Eagleby South
oh,
Primary School,
yes,
consulting the children, and then this ended up being their playground. And the
wow,
children requested that the playground was built in the out of bounds area at the back of the school. So that's where it
that's a
went. And they've seen
wow.
a 91% increase in physical activity, 74% increase in social connection, and 71% increase in language.
That's amazing.
Yes,
And I
and
suppose
that program's evaluated by the University of Queensland as well. So it's not just we said so. Yeah,
there's scientific data
yeah,
and independent data behind it. So
yep,
that's an amazing success, and I suppose that would extrapolate out to other schools, other childcare
yep,
or early learning services,
yeah.
and the other impact from what you were just mentioning with that data would be relationships that children form with each other as well.
Definitely. You see, there was another school in that area, and they saw a 15% increase in attendance in school. And in 1 year, they saw an estimated 60% drop in major behavioral incidents. So, this is where play is the work of children, and we need to get back to honoring that. That's where they develop an understanding of themselves, the world around them. What is acceptable socially, emotionally? When I have a thriving environment, I'm more likely to collaborate. I've got the functional vocab to be able to manage it without a reaction. I can respond to the world around me instead of reacting.
Wow. And this, and I like basically the natural playground can be part of any service, even if there's a theory behind it, such as your Montessori or your Reggio
Absolutely,
Emilia, something
absolutely.
like that, where it makes an impact in the children's lives.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And when you look at, I use the ecology framework a lot, and that's what a natural environment is about. It's developing understanding of that exploration. And if you want to layer in your pedagogical vehicle to complement that, it's a resource that can adapt. Like nature doesn't discriminate. Nature is
Yeah,
you've heard it, it's the third teacher, it's the ultimate teacher.
it is.
It's flexible, it's changeable, it meets you where you're at.
That's fantastic. Now, you mentioned the success at Eagleby and other schools
Yeah.
and the data. Is there any other successes you'd like to share with us that comes to mind?
Yeah. It's those little moments that you have engaging with children. I'm so proud of the fact that 10 years on, opposed to influencing 80 children a year where I was working, I could impact tens of thousands of children through not only building playgrounds, I can do that by going to talk at conferences and preaching, if you will, and advocating for children. Um, so the evolution and the acceptance from the sector of and being supportive of someone trying to meet your needs and serving you has been phenomenal. The success story about partnering with our clients, but they're partners. It's like, well, oh, we can support you to do this, and they give us feedback on how it's going and how it's implemented. And it's those little things like we built a play structure for a kinder yard. It was almost 1.8 meters high, as I recall, vertical wall, very challenging. And we had a low level of physical competence, like a net on one side, and then a medium level with like spaced out climbing holds, vertical wall, quite challenging. There was a little child that couldn't climb that for months. And that's okay. Like when he's there and he
Yeah.
can't do it, we don't say, put your left hip foot here, pull here, push here, because that's about my success, not his. And I'm stealing the accomplishment and joy for him. And said, okay, what's your plan? And he's like, I can't do it yet. Okay, I'm here if you need me. What's your plan from here? I think I'll rest and come back. 3 months,
That's so
you
gorgeous,
know.
isn't it?
And when you collaborate as a partner in play with children, I was there when I got to see him finally climb up, and the sense of achievement and joy in that child. Um, there's nothing that I could have dictated or had that child participate in for him to get that sense of achievement and joy. And the feedback from his mum was like, there's been a huge shift in his level of confidence in general due to that coming up against a challenge. And when we overcome challenges, that's when we get the biggest reward.
It is.
And
Even as an adult, the same thing.
absolutely,
When you can
absolutely,
imagine it. But and that reward for that little boy would be, would apply to so many parts of his life, like his mum said.
yeah,
Um, that even though it's hard, I can do it, and he has that
yeah.
satisfaction of doing it.
And you got that
And
refuge of mastery. You're like, hey,
yes,
maybe I'm not good at this, but I overcome my challenge last time, so I've always got that to come back to. And
yeah,
if I've got a solid relationship with my educator, and they're using all the language to support me within my environment, um, that's where I'm going to have a physiology of like dopamine accomplishment opposed to one of adrenaline. When a
yeah,
child's, if I'm not feeling safe and secure with my educator is stressed, always barking at me like, don't do that, do this, don't do that. I don't have the capacity to fail, because the thought of failing when my cup is already full um, is like, no, I'm just going to avoid it. I'm not going to deal with it. So it needs to, the Uri Bromfrembrenner theory of the ecological
yeah.
theory is that it's relationship in conjunction with environment.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I'm just sitting here imagining all those adults I know where they don't do things because the fear,
Mm,
and it, and for what I'm hearing from you is the children that are in these natural playgrounds that are, and obviously then there's a whole lesson around education, supervision, language. From the early learning service as well,
mm,
but we're looking to change the way children grow into adults to be more supportive, not only at an environmental level, but also at a relationship level.
100%. And it's through this sense of accomplishment and um, joy, fulfillment, and coupled with failure is that inform our values and
Yeah,
the values in which we stand on. And it's okay to be like, yeah, I'm really into that. I'm not into that. Absolutely fine. Working out your own and activating your internal locus of control, your own
absolutely.
decision making as a
Yeah,
child
yeah,
informs your life.
yeah. Now, can I ask you? I know I'm mindful of your time here, Lucas. Um, can I ask you with certification? Because obviously
Yep,
everything has to be certified.
absolutely.
How does that go? How does the service go about getting certification? Is that all part of your um, project as well, or do they do independent
So
certification?
we have a number of staff that are qualified certifiers, have gone through and done the playground assessment and all of that. However, we consider all of the certification, make sure it gets to the level when we're building. We have a completely independent certifier come in at the end of our projects. So they don't see a plan prior. If we're developing a really unique element that will be launching soon, stay tuned. We'll ask them to advise on, from structural and spacing and stuff like that. But from a project standpoint, they come in on the day we book them. They go through, they completely assess it as an independent company and give us a report. and that gets forwarded onto. And in addition to that, that's all good. A playground could be deemed safe. However, the
Yes.
biggest variable in that environment is not the environment itself, it's the behavior that's happening within that environment. And that's where we need to go in and teach language. We need to go in and talk about supervision plans with the staff, and how to assess the behavior being the variable in the environment. Because the classic thing is, if you've built a play structure, we can say how many children can be on that play structure. Say,
Yep.
5. Some will say 10, some will say 2. However, if there's one up there with the behavior that is in conflict to the environment, it's too many. We could
Yeah.
have 6, 10, and it's fine. So always teaching the staff around that culture of let's assess behaviour, let's equally assess. And we also hand over a assessment tool, a safety checks tool that the centres can use, a digital form. They can go
Oh,
through for their
fantastic.
safety checks at the start of the day based on the Australian Standards for Playgrounds and go bang, 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 bang. Here's the safety checks, sign, log it.
Yep.
So yeah,
Oh,
the other thing you can imagine for the safety checks or routine inspection, as it's called, or it's look, listen, and play assessment.
oh, that is so cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's so like you're saying with the staff, it's about changing the way that they have done things possibly in the past,
yep,
and looking at a different way of supervising um, and growing that child.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, look, that's amazing. Now, moving forward, what do you think are the big topics for the early learning service moving forward, early education and care moving forward?
It's a good question. Um, I'm really pleased to see the movement around inclusion for our neurodivergent children, and accommodations for ASD children, within designs of buildings, within designs of playgrounds. I see that continuing to be a push. What I would like to see is more ethical reasoning around it. Just because you build a sensory room full of light tubes and pillows doesn't necessarily make it inclusion.
Yes.
Which is great because I know Griffith University and teaming up with people in the childcare sector to actually assess what good looks like over the years, which is amazing. Griffith University doing, I think it's a 5-year study into what
Wow.
successful inclusion looks like, for a project that's being built on the Gold Coast. Um, so I think that's a big focus, and as always, the necessity of the childhood experience is continuing to be front and center, and around the diversity and experience. You know, the sandpit, the swing, the slide, the fort is okay. What's beyond that? Oh, we've got a raised garden bed for our sustainable practices. Well, okay, what beyond that? And what does a natural what I try to stay away from the word natural in general, but what does
Right.
a thriving environment look like?
Right. So, in fact, what I should have asked for at the start is what does a thriving playground mean rather than
Yeah,
natural?
well,
Is that where just changing that language a little bit?
it does, and language defines um, our experience. So when I first started Worthy, I was trying to change the words to um, not saying playgrounds because the association to it's a fort, but play environments. Um, but I found that it was a lot to explain every single time. And I can continue to do that as we work with clients.
Yes.
So it is about play environments.
Yeah. So this podcast out to our audience, well, we're learning about play environment rather than playgrounds,
Oh, there you go. That's up to you.
and thriving environments
Yeah.
as well. No, that's fantastic. Oh, wow. Now, before we finish up, we like to ask our guests what is wise words or favorite sayings that they may have or like to share with our audience.
Oh, this was a hard one to come up with only one. There's so many, but one I landed on was only children believe they are capable of everything. and that's Paulo Coelho. Paulo Coelho. Yes, that's a better
Yep.
pronunciation.
That's it. Yep.
And yeah, it just talks to children's view of the world that we have to honour. And they see themselves as capable and competent. So we can do the same. And don't let our own needs of protection hinder their growth. And it leads in that applies in adulthood as well. That if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're going to be right.
Either way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way. And then it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the little boy who climbed the wall, having that ability to master it yourself and put yourself through it. It's, even as an adult, that applies.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think a final thing would be we have to support children to feel so safe and secure that they're willingly moving towards challenge.
Yes. Yes. Oh, no. Look, that is wonderful. Look, thank you so much for your time, Lucas. It's been an absolute pleasure to learn more about thriving play environments. Is that
Absolutely, absolutely. You
fantastic?
nailed it.
And
Mike dropped it.